Hey, I'm Christian. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be taking a look at Cloudflare's new Agents framework, which is our new way to build and deploy agentic AI applications to Cloudflare's developer platform. In this video, I'm going to show you what an AI agent is, how to get started building with our agentic AI framework, and how to customize and deploy your own agent to Cloudflare's developer platform with a couple of interesting additions beyond the standard template that we're going to use to get started. If you haven't already checked out our Workers 101 video, I would definitely recommend that you watch that first so that you have a basic understanding of how to deploy applications on Cloudflare's network. I'll put a link to it up above here if you want to click that and check that out. Otherwise, let's jump into it. So at this point, you've probably used ChatGPT and you know what LLMs can do. Large language models are super smart. They can retrieve a ton of information and remix it in whatever way you would like. They're super powerful. But when it comes to actually accessing the real world, that's where things start to get a little tricky. We've introduced functions and tool calling to augment LLMs with additional functionality so they can do things like search the web or query our databases and services. But what they still can't do is go out and do things on our behalf without human intervention. That's where AI agents come in. AI agents allow us to define behaviors and then tell AI models to go out in the world and do stuff without our intervention, though sometimes we may want to confirm before it goes and changes something that we may not want it to change. But for the most part, you can think of AI agents as sort of interns set on a specific task that can go out and accomplish them. And in order to do that, we can give them access to a whole bunch of tools and behaviors and functionalities that allow it to complete those tasks correctly. Cloudflare's AI agent framework has a lot of built-in tools that make agents work really well on our platform. So we have things like real-time communication between yourself, the client, and the AI agent, so you can get streaming, real-time communication back and forth. We have the ability for agents to communicate with each other, so they can accomplish different tasks and work together to succeed at accomplishing more complicated things. And we also have storage and persistence. So if you refresh the page or you leave and come back, all of your chats and all of the information that you've been working with are still available to both yourself as well as the AI agent. And finally, we even have the ability to do some really interesting and complex things like queuing behavior for later on. So let's say that I want my agent to go and do something in 3 hours. Well, I could, of course, wait 3 hours and ask it to do it then, but who knows if I'll be at my computer at that point, right? Instead, what I want to do is say, hey, in 3 hours at 3 p.m., can you go and do this thing? And with Cloudflare's AI agents framework, we have the ability to queue up tasks and execute them at given times. It's a really interesting and powerful framework, and I'm really excited for you to check it out. Now, as always, the source code for the application we're going to be building in this video will be available in the description. I'll also put a link to our documentation, which you can find at developers.cloudflare.com/agents. Whether you're building with Cloudflare's agent framework or if you're using another framework but want to benefit from Cloudflare's developer platform, we have a bunch of resources in our documentation that show you how you can use Cloudflare to effectively accomplish your agent development tasks. It's a really awesome resource, and I think you'll like it a lot. Make sure to check it out in the description. And last thing, before we hop into the code, I want to shout out our Cloudflare Developers Discord. So if you are building on Cloudflare's developer platform, you can join tens of thousands of other developers around the world who are building not just with Cloudflare AI or Cloudflare's agent framework, but all of the developer primitives that we have on our platform, such as storage, compute, and all sorts of performance-based stuff that is really interesting and exciting. So make sure to join a Discord. I'll put a link to it in the description. Now with that, let's jump into the computer. We'll take a look at how we can get started building our first application with Cloudflare's agent framework. Let's get into it. So to start, I'm going to go to our agents documentation, which I just mentioned, and I'm going to find this line of code here to ship my first agent. I'm going to copy this line of code, mostly so you don't have to see me type it manually here in the video, and we'll take a look at what we can do to build our first application. So using the create Cloudflare at latest, we can use Cloudflare's create Cloudflare package, which provides a bunch of batteries included frameworks and templates to get started deploying on our platform. I'm going to give this project a name of Agents Starter, and then I'm going to pass in this flag here of template, which is Cloudflare/Agents Starter. This is a GitHub repository, github.com/Cloudflare/Agents Starter. So if you want to go and take a look at that, you certainly can. But for now, we're just going to run this and create our new project. So it's going to add this new GitHub repo in this Agent Starter directory, And it's also going to install all the dependencies that we need to run this application locally. We'll say, yes, we want to use Git for version control, and no, we don't want to deploy the application at this time. In the future, here in just a couple minutes though, we will of course deploy it. Now that we've done that, let's go ahead and look inside of the agent's starter directory. So we have this public folder and index.html, which represent the client-facing front end of this application, as well as the source directory, which if we take a look in here, there's all sorts of interesting stuff going on for rendering a server-rendered React application directly on Cloudflare's network. There are a lot of interesting things going on in the starter, and you can of course check it out in greater detail. But for now, let's go ahead and run this locally and see what we can see inside of the browser. So you can see that it's going to run on localhost 5173. And even before we pull it up in the browser, you can see we already have an alert here. OpenAI API key is not set. Don't forget to set it locally in .dev vars. And in production, we can use this command to upload that file directly up into production. So we need to set an OpenAI API key. So I'm going to open up .dev.vars. And I'm going to paste in OpenAI API key equals, and I'm going to go ahead and paste mine in. I'll be right back. So I've pasted in my API key and gone ahead and saved the file. Now let's go ahead and start this up again, and we'll see what this looks like in the browser. Now here in the browser, you can see I have this awesome UI set up for my AI chat agent, and I can go ahead and start a conversation with it. So I'll say, hey, how's it going? If I can type. I'm recording a video teaching developers how to use this framework. Anything you want to say? So, hey there, that sounds awesome. Here's something you can share with developers. Frameworks are tools that make your life easier, but the real magic happens when you understand the fundamentals. Don't be afraid to break things, happy coding, etc. Sounds good. So we will dive into the fundamentals and make sure we understand how this starter works so that we keep our promise to our AI chat agent. Now, one thing I want to show you is that there are actually a number of tools that come included inside of this chat agent. So I can say, what tools do you have available? And it's going to let me know I have this tool called weather information. I can use functions.gather weather information, local time, task scheduling, as well as multi-tool use. So all of this stuff is built in. Here's an example. I'm going to say, in 1 minute, can you get me the weather in Austin, Texas? And so it says, I've scheduled the task to get the weather in Austin, Texas in 1 minute. I'll fetch it for you then. In the meantime, I want to show you what's going on here in the console. You can see that I've set up this connection here, and it's connected to this chat. Now watch what happens here if I refresh. So you can see it's actually already pulled up the chat again. The state is all available here, and I basically have persistence between these connections. Now, if I close this tab and reopen it, I'll still get the same thing back up. It has the ability to hold on to this chat and persist it inside of storage, which is pretty cool. Now, in just a few seconds, we should see the weather function get called here. And just as a reminder, we didn't ask it to run this weather function now, right? We asked it, hey, in 1 minute, can you go ahead and run this? So we have the ability to queue things up as it's set up here, task scheduling. And now you can see, just as promised, it said get the weather in Austin, Texas. And now we have this function approval here. So this is what's called human in the loop. And this is a really important part of the Cloudflare Agents framework. When you're building AI agents, there is a lot of stuff that you are going to be just fine with the AI going and doing for you. So for instance, you may have it go search the web, and you don't need to necessarily give it approval to go and do that. It can just sort of go do it, get the information, and come back to you. But for instance, if you're setting up something where you're going to write to a database, like a business specific, really important database that you're going to give this AI agent access to, you want to be able to confirm and see what that agent is going to do before it actually does it. So this get weather information function is a great example of a function that requires human in the loop to be able to go and do this thing. So you can see the function here is called get weather information, and the argument here is the city of Austin, Texas. Now I can either reject this or I can approve it. In this case, obviously, I will approve it. It says the weather in Austin, Texas is sunny. Let's take a look here behind me. Looks pretty sunny outside. I think that's good. Let's see, what is the weather in Seattle? Once again, it's going to call this human in the loop function again, right? Get weather information. I'm going to say approve. The weather is sunny as well. And if we go and look here in the console, you can see it's going and getting the weather information for both of these. So that's a look at some of the scheduled task functionality and calling functions inside of this AI agent. Now, before we jump into the code, I want to again call out that this starter template is a great way to get started. And if you want to understand some of the bigger details, you can go and check out the GitHub repository for Cloudflare/agents. So this is where really the meat of this application is. You can see there's things like persistent state in memory, real-time communication, operating autonomously at global scale, hibernating, awakening, etc. There's a lot of really interesting stuff going on in this project. So I've gone ahead and killed the server, and now we're looking inside of this directory. Let's go ahead and open up source/server and take a look at how this application works. So you can see it uses a combination of the Agents SDK, which is Cloudflare's Agents framework, as well as the Vercel AI SDK to generate the streaming responses and return those back to the client. We also have this process tools call being imported. And then finally, we have both tools and executions, which are being imported from the tools file. We're going to go look at that here a little bit later when we define our first custom tool. So scrolling down here, we can see that we have this class here called chat. Now, this extends the AI chat agent, which is imported from Cloudflare's Agents SDK. This is how you write your own AI agent. It's very easy to use, actually really impressively easy to use. You can define this function here called async on chat message, which is going to be what handles incoming messages to your agent. And so inside of this agent context, we can run this callback function, which is asynchronous, which allows us to process tool calls. So that's handling the messages that we currently have, the data stream, which we can write to, as well as both tools and executions. We can process any tool calls that need to happen. And then we can use OpenAI using the Vercel OpenAI wrapper. We can go and generate text from GPT-4o. Of course, using Vercel AI SDK is super easy. You can swap this out for whatever model you would like. So if you don't want to use GPT and you want to use Claude or Gemini or whatever you may want to use, you can swap out this code with whatever model you would like. This class here is just one instance of an AI agent. You may have different agents that use different models that you can specify however you want them to work, and that can all happen in this file, or you can split them out in different files, really however you want to organize it. But you still have this extremely consistent pattern of handling chat messages using this function. So all of this stuff is figured out for you inside of the framework. So you can see the prompt here is a system prompt. You are a helpful assistant that can do various tasks. If the user asks, you can schedule tasks to be executed later. We pass in this messages here. We pass in a list of tools, which are all the tools that the model has available to it. And then finally, once it's completed, we can merge it into this data stream. The last thing I want to show you in this file is how this agent actually gets called from inside of our workers application. So a worker entry point is a module that defines a fetch function, which is what actually handles the incoming request and returns a response back. In order to plug our agent into that request flow, we call this await route agent request. And if we go and find that function, you can see it's actually imported from the agent's SDK. So we have route agent request, we have request here, which is the incoming request, and then we have the environment. Inside of that environment, we can see we have our first agent. So our chat agent is this agent namespace with the type passed in of this chat agent. So we can provide multiple agents inside of this environment, and then we can use the route agent request function to route them to different agents depending on what the task may be. Really cool, really impressive stuff. The next thing I want to show you is tool definitions. So when we looked at this agent inside of the UI, we saw that it had a couple different tools available to it. For instance, it could get the local time, it could look up weather information, and it could also schedule tasks for the future. So inside of this tools.ts file, we can see what it takes to actually define a tool. This uses the Vercel AI SDK to define a new tool. You can see that we import this tool function, and this get weather information is calling that tool function, passing in some parameters. So first, a description, which is what this tool actually does. Some parameters, which is a Zod instance of an object with a city string inside of it. And then importantly, this line here shows that we're omitting what's called the execute function. Now I want to show you why this matters. Let's go and look at this get local time. So this is another instance of a tool. So it gets the local time for a location. The parameter is an object with a location string inside of it. And this execute function is a asynchronous function that takes the parameters in and just returns the string 10 a.m. So this has an explicit execute step attached to it. We know that anytime we call get local time, in this case, it's hard-coded to return 10 a.m. This get weather information does not have an execute function. And what happens here is when we don't define that execute function, we're starting to indicate that this tool requires human confirmation. Again, this is that idea of human in the loop, which ensures that the human has to explicitly confirm, run this function, I'm okay with it, given the parameters that you're going to run it with, before the AI agent goes and does that. Now, if we scroll down here to the bottom of the file, we can see that there is this separate export here besides tools. So tools here is just an object with the 3 tools that we've set up. There is also an executions object, which also gets exported. Inside of that, there is a function here called get weather information. So this matches the name of the tool, get weather information, but is an explicit execution step, which is part of what allows the framework to indicate this requires human in the loop intervention. Now, in this case, you can see it's also just hard coding the weather is sunny. Now, in this case, it is actually sunny in Austin, so that's okay. When I asked if it was sunny in Seattle, it might have been lying a little bit to me, but that's okay. In this case, this is a manual execution. This is human in the loop confirmation required. Now, if I do a search here for get weather information, and I go to app.tsx, you can see that there is this block of code here called tools requiring confirmation. This is a named tool here, get weather information, that says when the function get weather information is called, we need to explicitly confirm that. And that's where the human in the loop intervention piece comes into play. Now that we've looked at the basics of how the framework works, we're going to add a new function. I'm going to use a tool called firecrawl.dev, which allows an AI agent to crawl the web and search for any given query. And by doing that, I'm going to allow it to go and look up the top news for 3 different places: BBC, Fox, and CNN. So what I'm going to do is define a custom function, which takes one of those 3 news parameters and then uses Firecrawl on the back end to go and scrape the top news for that page. Now, if you don't have a Firecrawl account, everything I'm going to do here should work under the free plan. But if you also just want to follow along and kind of see how it works, you don't necessarily have to go and create an account yourself. It's just an example to show you how easy it is to define a new function. So here I've signed into my Firecrawl account, and you can see that I have an API key that I can go ahead and copy. The next thing I need to do is install this JavaScript package. So if we go here in the documentation and I scroll down, you can see that if I select node here, I just need to do npm install @mendable/firecrawljs. So I'm going to run that here. I'm going to install that package. And then back in my tools.ts file, I'll get started defining the integration with Firecrawl. So to start, I'm going to import this Firecrawl package, Firecrawl app, and then I'm going to set up a new function here called get top news. This is going to be a tool. You can see it's AI code completion is already trying to define it for me. So I'm going to say get the top news from a given source. The parameters is going to be source z.string. Here I could use like an enum or something like that and say it needs to be one of these 3, but in this case, for this example, I'll just keep it very simple. Our execute here, we remember that if we define this, it will automatically go and call this function. In this case, I'm going to, just like with the weather information, actually omit that execute function so that it requires me to confirm using the human in the loop workflow that I want to run this tool before the AI model can go and do so. Okay, now coming down here, I'm going to define get top news. This is going to have a parameter here, which is an object with some options inside of it, or parameters. In this case, I have the source here, where the source is going to be string. Source can only be CNN, BBC, or Fox. And then what I can do here is say if the CNN, BBC, Fox, if it does not include the source, I'll just throw a new error that says invalid source. And actually, maybe to make this a little bit easier, what I will do is up here on this function, I'll say either CNN, BBC, or Fox. Now, this description here is given to the AI model, and it should sort of help guide it. So for instance, if I say get the news from CNN, it should know that the value should be CNN here. Again, with a better Zod specification, we can make this very, very explicit, but for our case, it should be good enough. Now, inside of here, we know that we have this all set up. We need to go ahead and get access to this Firecrawl app. So here I'm going to say, copy this, const app equals new Firecrawl app with this API key passed in. So we have an API key here. How do we actually access it? Well, to do that, we're going to make use of this agent context. Now, the agent context is basically the entire state of the agent currently as this function is running. So if I come down here into this schedule task here, you can see that we use this agent context.getStore function to get access to our agent. We're going to copy this line here and we're going to paste it here. So we're going to say agent equals agent context.getStore. And then what we're going to do is get access to the API key. Oh, and by the way, maybe we'll just do a check here. If no agent is found, we'll say API key equals agent.env.firecrawl API key. Now, this env here is strictly typed using the environment that we defined inside of our workers application. So let's open up source/server. We'll go and find this env here, and we're going to add Firecrawl API key, which is going to be another value here inside of this env. So once we've gotten the API key, we can pass it into this app here as the API key parameter into our Firecrawl app. Now we have the option of learning just a little bit about how this SDK works in order to go and scrape a URL. If I scroll down here and find the scrape function, you can see that using the node library, I can say app.scrape URL, giving it a URL as well as a format here, which is going to be Markdown. So what I'll say is const page equals app.scrape URL. And then I'm going to give it a URL here, which we'll define in just a second, as well as a format, which is going to be Markdown. Now this URL here we'll do a switch statement for and say URL will be one of these three. In this case, I actually don't want it to be the RSS feeds. I want it to be these different sources. So I'll say let URL is a string, and then I will define one of those strings here as either CNN, BBC, or Fox. Okay, so now we've set up our page here. We need to await this scrape.url, which will go and actually make this request using the scraping API and return it as Markdown. And then inside of that, you can see we have the scrape result. So it says the SDK will return the data response directly, curl will return the payload. So inside of this, we have Markdown, HTML, all these different things. So what I'm going to do is return page.markdown. And real quick, I'll say if page success, then throw an error that we failed to scrape the page. And that should be all that we need to do in order to set up the function definition of this new tool. Now, the last thing we need to do is go into app.tsx and add it as a tool requiring confirmation, saying get top news. And actually, one more thing, we almost missed this, but it's super important, is we need to export these functions. So get top news gets exported there. This execution, it's part of this execution block, is already getting exported. And I believe that's all we need to do. Now what we'll do is we'll say npm start, and we'll run this again and open it up in the browser to see our new tool in action. Okay, so we've refreshed the browser. I've cleared out all the state so we can see a brand new chat agent. And I'm going to say, what tools do you have available? You'll note it lists some tools here, but this is kind of hard-coded right now. I could have gone and changed this if I wanted to. But for now, I'll just say, what tools do you have available? And right here, we can see the second tool here, top news. I can fetch the top news from a specific source using the functions.getTopNews tool. One thing I just remembered, before we actually run this, we do need to set that Firecrawl API key. So I'm going to say Firecrawl API key, and I'm going to go ahead and paste this value in, just like I did the last one with OpenAI. I'll go ahead and save it and close it, and I'll come back to you in just a sec. Okay, so I'm starting my server back up, and now we have that set up. I'll refresh here, and I'm going to say, get the top news from BBC. And you can see we have this new human-in-the-loop confirmation to get the top news from BBC. Let's go ahead and run this, and fingers crossed that this works like we would expect. So it's going to go call Firecrawl, and then it should send back, after parsing the information, the top news from BBC. There we go. Oh, there it is. Excellent. So you can see it's returning Markdown here. It's summarized the top 5 stories, Now, in this case, maybe we add a little bit of markdown parsing here. We could see what this actually looks like. But these are the top new highlights from BBC directly from the website, live right now. So pretty awesome and not too much work to implement. We built our own new tool and added it to this agent and added the ability for it to be confirmed using human in the loop functionality. Really awesome and really exciting. Now, the last thing I want to do is show you how to deploy this application. So if I open up wrangler.jsonc, this is the configuration file for this project. And the only thing I'm going to change in here right now is called this Agents 101. I probably already have a project called Agents Starter because I've been playing a lot with agents and with our agents framework. So I'm going to name this Agents 101, and we'll see this deployed here to production in just a moment. Before we do that, I want to show you some of the other stuff going on in here. So we have this public directory, which represents our UI that we've been looking at. We have durable objects set up, which is our real-time coordination library that allows us to build these chat agents. You can go check out the durable objects documentation to learn more about how that works. We also have things like observability. So we'll have built-in tracing and logs for all of this stuff that you can add using any console log in your application. You can see how your application is working in real time. There's all sorts of other examples in the rest of this file to show you how to integrate other Cloudflare developer platform tools. A lot of really interesting stuff going on here. So finally, I'm going to run npm run deploy. It's going to take my entire application, it's going to bundle it up, and it's going to deploy it to Cloudflare's developer platform, taking this application and distributing it to all of Cloudflare's servers around the world. So no matter where you're accessing from, it should be incredibly fast. So now we have agents101.signalnerve.workers.dev. The last thing I'm going to do is run wrangler latest in secret. And this will show us how to upload our entire .dev.vars file up to production without us having to do too much work. So I'm going to use wrangler secret bulk.dev.vars. It's going to parse all of that information inside of that file, and you can see it's going to set both the OpenAI API key as well as the Firecrawl API key. And now we can go ahead and open that URL. I'll scroll up here and find that. It's automatically deployed, by the way, with HTTPS, like all Workers applications, so it'll be secure by default, which is great. And now I'll open up this new tab, and you can see it's running here. I'll change it to light mode to match the rest of the video. And if I say, hey, how's it going? It says I'm just a virtual assistant, so I don't have feelings, but I'm here to ready help you, whatever you need. That's great. I'll say, get the top news from CNN. I'll say approve. It's going to go and do that. And hey, maybe in the meantime here, I'll get started with queuing up a task and say, get me the weather for Austin, Texas in 1 minute. I'm going to wait for it to go ahead and return that response. But just to show you that you can do all this task queuing stuff, not just locally, but in production as well. So there's some information here. I'm going to say, get the weather in 1 minute. It's going to go ahead and start queuing that up. And in the meantime, I want to show you just a couple other resources, and we'll come back here in just about a minute or so. I mentioned Cloudflare's agents documentation, and I want to kind of come back to it here at the end of the video to show you some stuff that you should check out. So if you want to look at things like workflows, you can understand how you actually build a real orchestration layer for your AI agent applications that allows it to work well together. Different pieces, different agents, different tools. There's all the sorts of different pieces here. If you want to understand how to define tools, what are, for instance, common tool patterns or what sort of things are available, this is not just specific to Cloudflare's agent framework, but really covers the gamut of writing powerful AI agents, with some pieces maybe on Cloudflare's developer platform, but other pieces talking to all of the incredible things in the AI ecosystem right now. And finally, if you want to check out things like guides or examples, we have all of these different things here for different pieces of building AI workflows on top of Cloudflare's tooling. So there's a lot of stuff to dig into, and I definitely would recommend that's your next place to check out. Now, coming back here, we can see it's been about a minute, and I'll say, yes, grab the weather for Austin. Now, we do know, we kind of looked under the hood, and we know that it's always going to return sunny. And in this case, it is still sunny in Austin. So we know this is going to work. But I just wanted to show you an example that even in production, the ability to queue up these tasks and run them in the future works great. So this is a really awesome tool. It's built in production as well. The Agents framework, really great way to get up and running with your agentic AI applications on Cloudflare Stack. Thanks so much for watching the video. I hope you found it interesting and useful. I would love to hear in the comments what you're building with Cloudflare's Agents framework, and make sure to check out some of the other videos on our channel where we're covering building with AI, including some other examples of our Agents framework and some of the other awesome tooling that we have in Cloudflare's developer platform for building real-time persistent AI applications. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.